Well, welcome everybody. I appreciate you coming. This is always an interesting exercise for me because I'm used to talking, but I'm not used to trying to deliver messages or inspire people necessarily. I'm used to doing school closings primarily. So if any of you grew up, I know a lot of you are from out of town, but if you grew up in this area, let me just introduce myself. Newburgh, 2-hour delay, no morning kindergarten. I say that in my sleep. And I've been doing that literally for 40 years. Can you imagine doing school closings doing anything for 40 years? When you say that, sister, it just boggles my mind. When I look back, I started on the air, actually it's 41 years, 42 years now. But when I started on the air in 1972, when I look back on those days and I try to remember, it seems like a different lifetime ago. So I come to you as an older person, a wiser person, and someone who would love to see any one of you succeed in broadcasting, whatever, you know, whether it's internet broadcasting or television or radio, or maybe they'll come up with something new in the next, few years that I haven't even heard of yet, because it's a great way to make a living. If you love it, you will enjoy it to the nth degree. They always say, if you have a job that you love, it's not really work. Well, it really is work. When you have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to work, that's work. But having said that, it's the best job I could ever have imagined. I don't think I have any other skills, so there's not much else I could do. But having said that, I love what I do each and every day. And one of the things that people ask me all the time is, what time do you get up? I already told you, 4:30. But one of the things that gets me out of bed, first thought that pops into my mind every morning is, who am I going to talk to today? What are we going to do on the air? What's special about this day? Because each day is different. I did news for 28 years. And what I loved about that, I started in news gathering and everything, that changes minute by minute sometimes. Certainly hour by hour, day by day. So every day is different. You could be sitting there, nothing going on, and suddenly something dramatic happens. I mean, unfortunately, it's usually bad, but that's what your job is, to report the news to the masses. And I love that aspect of being a reporter. I love being the first person to know, like Kathleen, you were so excited to say, the Pope, that kind of energy you get from being the first person to know something and then being able to tell everybody about it in a proper way, objective way, quick, accurate, factual. That floated my boat for 28 years. But then when the opportunity came to move from news, which I said I had done almost 3 decades, into disc jockey work, I had done a little bit of each, but I said, I'm going to do it. So on my son Michael's 13th birthday in 2000, that was the landmark day, I started on WHUD as the morning show man. And it's been magic ever since. We're the #1 rated morning show in 9 counties. Because the Hudson Valley, just as a parenthetical thought, the Hudson Valley now is its own radio ratings area. We used to be considered parts of other, New York City, and Poughkeepsie was part of like a different segment. Now the Hudson Valley, Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, Orange, Rockland, Ulster, Sullivan, and Pike County, Pennsylvania. I don't know how they got in there. Some sort of backdoor deal that Pike County got in there. But those 9 counties now comprise the Hudson Valley radio market. And for those of you who have done any research into radio and stuff like that, New York City is the #1 market in the world. Los Angeles is #2, and then, by population, it goes down the list. Well, the Hudson Valley, you wouldn't think of it, is number 39 in the United States, which is not bad. We went from being nothing to being 39th. We're bigger than like Albuquerque, New Mexico, and some other cities that you might have heard of. So it's a great place to work. We're close enough to the city where we can hop on a train or jump in the car and get to the city and do everything we want to do there. We get artists who come through on the circuit, so we're close enough to meet some of them and interview them and have them on the show. So this has just been a dream come true. So if I could wish something for each of you, it would be to have a career, have a job, have a life like I've had, because it's been the best that I could have hoped for. So having said all that, I'll take questions. No. Let me give you a little back. I will take questions at the end because I'd love to hear. It always fascinates me what things people want to hear about radio. And let me just address the whole issue of radio because it comes up right away. What's the future of radio? How has satellite radio influenced you, Sirius XM and all that? I haven't seen any evidence that it's affected us at all, the satellite radio. I'm not saying that people don't listen to it. Obviously they do. But as far as my day-to-day job, nothing has changed because of Sirius XM. I know that they do a great job and people love them, but what they don't deliver on a daily basis are the school closings, like I mentioned before, which is a bread and butter, up-to-date traffic information for the locality in which the station is, news, whether it's local or national or international, the weather forecast, which is very important for people in the daily operation of their lives, and things like that. So, they can't win tickets to go to a concert in Poughkeepsie necessarily on Sirius XM, because of the nationality of it, that it's nationwide and it's not specific to the local area. And the other thing that's happened in radio is a lot of big companies own stations where there's really nobody there most of the time. They're automated. They run off satellite feeds, or they do what they call voice tracking, which is the disc jockey can record a 4 or 5 hour show in like 20 minutes by doing inserts into the computer. And they can even do it from another city. So a lot of the Clear Channel stations, as an example, and one of my sons works for Clear Channel, so this is nothing against Clear Channel, it's just the way they operate. They could have a guy, one of their top people, guy or gal, in Milwaukee, but that afternoon they're also on in Seattle, and they're on in Atlanta, and they're on in Texas somewhere, because they're voice tracking all these different stations. And as long as they know the call letters in front of them and they can print out in advance what the music is going to be going into the break and what the music is going to be after the break, he or she can make it sound like they're sitting there in Austin, Texas, or in Philadelphia, and they're nowhere in sight. That's kind of a negative toward that type of programming, because there is no local thing. If somebody calls the hotline in the studio and says, a plane just crashed into town hall, what do? There's not even anybody there to answer the phone. HUD and our sister station K104 are two 50,000 watt stations that have 24/7, 365 coverage of a live person in the studio, almost without exception. Occasionally K104 has some automated periods, but basically they have people there all the time. That is not the industry standard anymore, unfortunately. But I think it shows the commitment our company has to keeping it local. We call it live and local, whatever you want to call it, catchphrase. But it really is important to have somebody there to pass on the news that, the cheerleading team is stuck on the thruway, so for the parents waiting at XYZ high school, the kids are going to be late. Things like that. I mean, it doesn't seem like much, but if you're a parent, or in this case, if you're a young person who may have an interest, to hear it on the radio and to know that you have that voice coming right back at you live is valuable, we think. So my son Michael, you might have heard, he's on K104 at night, 7 to midnight, Michael Bennett. So he is carrying on the Bennett name, and even though he's a young guy, he's getting married this summer, but he's still a young guy in my mind. He's already done things that I have never even done in my life in over 42 years. So it's amazing for me to watch him grow. He's now the music director. He meets with all the record companies and all the artists, and he just does an amazing job. And I didn't reach those kinds of levels of management or decision making till I was, 30, 40 years into it. So, and when he walked out on stage the first time at K-Fest, this is like 5 years ago now, and there was like 12,000, 15,000 people, as soon as he walked out on stage, he walked out in front of a bigger crowd than I've ever been in front of. So I really resent the kid, is really what I'm trying to tell you. Hate him with a passion. As I mentioned, my youngest, Matthew, is a grad student at the University of Albany, and he works for the Clear Channel cluster up there. When they have all these stations together, they call them a cluster. They're all in one building. They call it a cluster. He's a sales assistant. He puts in all the computer details for advertisement. But then at night, he goes to school. So he's in radio. My daughter, who's the oldest of the three, is about to have our first grandchild next month, which is very exciting. I highly recommend it. You're not ready yet, but when the time comes, it's very exciting. And to see your child, who's not much older than you, really, well, she's 30, so she's a little older than you, pregnant is just such an odd thing. I know this has nothing to do with the topic at hand, but I want to tell you, I watched her first, I took her on her first date where I stopped to put air in my tire and the tire blew up in my face. Another story for another day. You know, when she got married, you know, all of that I was on board with and everything, but seeing her pregnant and, you know, a belly out like this and knowing that she's going to have a child 1 month from today is her due date, it's just extraordinary. So I'm blessed. So I keep saying that, but I really, you know, I had a heart attack a couple of years ago. Not that I was near death, but I had a heart attack, and that's as close to death as I want to get right now. So once you have that, you appreciate everything even more. Everything kind of crystallizes in your vision. You know, I'm not suggesting you go out and have a near-death experience, although, you know, if you're not doing anything this weekend, no. So back in 1972, is there anybody who was born in 1972? You're, no, get out of here. What are you? Oh, a couple of reluctant hands over here. Sister, somebody help Sister's hand up. Well, back in the day, I came out of high school. I don't know about you folks, as you're doing very well. Many of you are about to graduate from a great college. But I got out of high school and I was the biggest goof off. I know it's hard to believe. I was the biggest goof off, and so I went to Monroe Woodbury, right down the road. And out of the class, 50% roughly of the kids, like 100 kids, went to OC, went to Orange County Community College, because we didn't know what else to do. Plus, if you were going to college, you could get a deferment. You know, we were still at war then. So we all went to OC, and what I majored in, I went to the cafeteria to start the day, and I'd be with a bunch of friends, and there were so many of us that when the bell rang and they switched classes, another group would come in, and I would just sit there and entertain them and talk to them, and we played the little football game with the piece of paper. I mean, it was great. I never left the cafeteria. I wasn't eating or anything. I was just having fun. So they thought that it was better if I didn't come back. They kind of it was kind of a mutual decision. But oddly enough, I gave a speech there a couple of months ago in their auditorium, and it was classic. I had to pay a parking fine from 1970 in order to get on campus, but it was worth it. So I started out, when I got out of high school, I had no clue. I went to OC because that was the place you went if you didn't have a clue. And now a lot of people did very well and then went on to four-year colleges or whatever, got their associate's degree, and that was it. The only thing I swear to God this is true, and it's hard to believe, the only credit I got at OC was for phys ed. I was playing soccer. I know it's really, even I can't believe it. And the only class that I went to, and I loved it, I wasn't enrolled in. I don't suggest this to you, but my cousin, who was from the Cornwall School District, also went to OC, and we were like brothers. We had grown up together. And so he was going to a psychology class. I said, well, that sounds interesting. So I would go to the class, and the teacher would stand up at the front of the class. This is the wrong story to be telling you. And he would go down the, you know, in those days they actually took attendance. Do you take attendance? You do, okay. So he would run down the list, and he'd, you know, call out the names, and everybody would raise their hand or nod or whatever, and I'd sit up front, and he'd say, and you are? I'd say, Bennett. I said, I just transferred, and the paperwork hasn't caught up with me yet. Oh, okay. And then this went on. I took the final, I took the... He was great. He was really great. Wasn't real good on attendance, but he was great as a teacher. Well, anyway, so I went to OC. That was very short-lived. You know, in and out, here's your hat, what's your hurry? The only thing I had to show for it was a couple of parking tickets and a great night at the Red Garter Inn, which was right around the corner. So I didn't know what to do. So I was working actually at Brotherhood Winery. Anybody here from Washingtonville by any chance? Are you? So you know Brotherhood Winery, America's oldest winery. Pardon? No, but I mean it's America's oldest winery, and that's their claim to fame. It was started back, you know, 1700 or whatever. So I got a job there, and that was the best job I ever had. If you ever have a chance to work at a winery, I mean, it sounds obvious, but it's really great. Let me tell you a little inside story about that. But this is way back when. They don't do this anymore. They had tours. I'm sure they still do that. And the tours roughly 20 people. And so they used to have a federal guideline book, and they had to keep track of each tour. So tour number 2 is 22 people, tour number 3 is 25 people, so on. And at the end of the night, I was in charge, again, hard to believe, of the federal tax books. I had an adding machine and a ledger. All I needed was like the McDuck visor over my head and I would have been all set. And my job was to reconcile the number of people that went on the tours that day and the number of empty bottles we had in the tasting rooms. And they allowed for each person like 8 ounces of wine or 6, whatever it was. So at the beginning of the day, they counted each bottle, quarter, half, 3/4 full. And then at the end of the night, they counted the empties and coordinated that. And then you had to give 6 ounces, let's say, to each person. And that number, this hurts my head just thinking about it, that number had to match up at the end of the night. Most nights, it didn't even come close, but the federal government, they really don't keep that close track of wine sales in the United States. And the whole point of it was that the wine that they sold, they paid federal excise tax on. And the wine that they used for tasting was tax-free because it was used in the, the cost of doing business. But, if you were not kosher, you would take some of the wine that you're not paying tax on and sell it and save and pocket the difference. So they wanted to keep track of that. So what we would do is every Friday, when we would shut down at 5 o'clock, if we had 10 tours that day, the employees became tour number 11. And if there were 6 of us, we'd put down 25. And then me, with my adding machine, I'd figure out exactly how many bottles we could drink. And somebody would bring wine and cheese, and it was just great. So don't go there now and tell them the story because it was a long time ago. So I was working at Brotherhood Winery, not doing anything specific. I was driving a forklift at one point and pinned my boss up against a wooden barn with the fork. Always learn how to go in reverse in a manual shift forklift that you've never driven before. So I was working there and waiting for something to happen. And one day, and the school doesn't even exist, but there was a school called Announcer Training Studios. And it literally was on the back of a matchbook cover. One side said, learn how to drive a semi. And then when you turned it over, it said, learn how to be a DJ. I said, well, there you go. I don't really want to drive, so I'm going to take a bus into Manhattan. It was on 48th Street or whatever. And it was an intensive thing, just like the kind of education you've gotten here. Very intensive. We covered television in 1 day, and then radio in about 3 months. And then you got a diploma. We had a big ceremony, and they shoot you out the door. And the thing about this school doesn't exist anymore. But their philosophy was, oh, you sound great. How much is that a week? Yes, pay the money. So they would take your money, and they really didn't give you an honest evaluation of whether you had any talent. So I had people in my class, we had about a dozen people, and some of them couldn't even speak. And I say this truthfully. One guy had a speech impediment. Another guy was just absolutely crazy. He would talk to himself through the whole class. I'm noticing this in the back. No, I'm just kidding. So it was just a wacky thing, but they would take everybody's money. Now, it turned out that there were a few of us that really had an ability to communicate and had some interest in learning how to do it right. And then at the end of this intensive 3 months, they would have you make an audition tape. In those days, it really was a tape, a reel of tape. And you would send these out to hundreds of radio stations up and down the East Coast or wherever you wanted to relocate to with your resume. And in those days, too, you had to go and pass an FCC test to show that you knew how to operate a radio station, like lower the power, raise the power, turn it on, turn it off. And you had to have an FCC license, an actual license to go on the air. None of this exists anymore. This was back in the day. So I signed up for this school. My mother, God rest her soul, and my stepfather, God rest his soul, put up the money for me because I had no money. And they sent me to this vocational school in Manhattan. And it was really good in a sense that I learned a lot, and I got a little bit of an education about what it was like. But it was crazy, crazy people in the class. I mean, nobody that you'd want to be associated with today. And it doesn't exist anymore, but one of their people that, the big name they had was Sue Simmons. You know who that is? Sue Simmons. She just got fired from Channel 4. But she was there a long time. But that was their calling card, was Sue Simmons went here. So that was exciting. That, I went to the same school as Sue Simmons. So I went to Announcer Training Studios. So here's how you get a job based on absolutely nothing. I, at the time, was also working my stepfather was a lawyer broker. So I went and I would sit in the office. When I wasn't doing anything, I'd sit in the office in Highland Mills, and if somebody called, I'd answer the phone. So he said to me, to make this legit, because he was an attorney, didn't want to see me go to jail, You have to get your real estate license, because then if somebody comes in and wants to see a house, you can legally take them to see it, and if you ever sold anything, which I did not, you would get a commission. I said, all right. So I studied, and I passed one of the few accomplishments in my life. I passed the real estate test, which again, back in the 70s, was much easier than it is now, I'm told. I would never be able to pass it again. So on my resume, when I got out of ATS, Announcer Training Studios, it said on the bottom of my resume, third class FCC license, and it said real estate license. Well, when the people saw this at this little station in Hyde Park in Dutchess County, they said, oh my God, look at this guy. He's got an FCC, we can put him on the air, and he's got a real estate license. He must be good at sales. Now, of course, what that didn't say was, I have never shown a house in my life. I've never sold anything. In fact, I took one family one time to this old, dilapidated, fixer-upper, and I stood by my car and I said, go ahead, look at it. Real salesman. And I said, because I'm not going to talk you into buying a house if you don't want to buy it, right? I mean, it's not like you're selling them a book bag or something. I mean, it's a big purchase. So my thought was, if they don't like it or they don't have the money, what am I going to talk them into the money? I mean, so I wasn't a really good salesman. But they didn't know that in Hyde Park. So I was hired. I went up for an interview. I got hired. And they threw me a crumb. They put me on the news on the weekend. And during the week, they sent me out as a salesman. Now, this was a station in Hyde Park. If you know your geography, my territory to sell was Kingston. You couldn't even hear the station in Kingston. So they sent me up there. They thought that was a good testing ground to see how the famous salesman would operate in a difficult environment. Well, again, my lack of sales skills came to the fore very quickly. I remember going into a lumber yard, with no appointment or anything, cold call, and I walked in, and I was all dressed up. I looked the part, but I just didn't have any ability. And I said to the gentleman, I said, hi, I'm Mike from, what will they call it? Oh, WHVW in Hyde Park, radio. And he goes, uh-huh. He'd never heard of us. If he drove to Hyde Park and parked in our driveway, he probably would still have trouble picking us up. 500-watt daytime station, like the lowest possible wattage you can have. Anyway, so my opening line to him was, you don't want to buy radio advertising, do you? And he said, nope. I said, okay, I'll be back in a couple of months. And I went out, and I took like 10 minutes to write a report, how I met with the guy, that he wasn't interested right now, but he did say to come back. Always looking forward, looking hopeful. And so, luckily, when the first weekend came up that I was going to be on the air, they didn't know what to expect. They stuck me on a Saturday morning when, nobody was listening. And there were virtually nobody listening any time of the day, but Saturday morning in particular. But because of the great training I got at ATS, when they hit this, and this was real high-powered top 40 news, good morning, I'm Mike Bennett, WHVW News. In the news in Hyde Park, there was a fire last night and 3 people were homeless, whatever it was. Bing, bang, boom, real, like this. And we used to hit the audio that we played. Now it's played off computers in a software system, but in those days they were on these things called carts. And they were little, almost like 8-track tapes, which you never heard of either. And you had them in a machine and you'd line them up and you'd hit the button when, the proper moment, and then you had the out cue and bing, bang, boom, I hit it. And at the end of the newscast, they had this thing that they ripped off some Chicago, Illinois station that was this big voice saying, repeating the big story. And then you had to remember what you led with so you didn't sound like an idiot. So you just jotted down a note, fire in Hyde Park. So bing, bang, boom, I get to the end, repeating the big story, fire in Hyde Park. I'm Mike Bennett, 95, WHVW News, boom. And the jock hit the music. I can even remember doing it. It was great. It was really great compared to what they had. Okay, they had people, the news director was an alcoholic. When he left, we found bottles everywhere. I'm not kidding. I wish I was making this up. So they were very impressed by my on-air skills. So within 5 months, I was no longer doing sales. And again, I know that's hard to believe when you consider the level of competence I bring to sales. But I was the news director in 5 months. Not just part-time on the weekends, I was news director. The news director, as I said, was an alcoholic. He got in trouble. Can I even tell this story? We didn't have a delay. So whatever was said when he used to do a noontime talk show, and by noontime, he was feeling no pain. Yeah, it was a little southern guy, Ted Jones, his name was. God rest his soul. I'm sure he's dead. He had on a member of the Poughkeepsie school board. I got to leave the names out, I suppose, because this is being videotaped. I should put this up in front of my face. We've disguised his appearance. So a guy called up, and again, no delay. So whatever's said on the air, that was it. It went out over the, the 500 watts to the 4 people that were listening. So Ted Jones had one of the members of the Poughkeepsie school board on, and her husband was a high-powered attorney who actually was representing Gordon Liddy in the Watergate case, because Liddy was from Dutchess County. He was an assistant DA in Dutchess. So this guy was on a national scene in Washington back in the Watergate days, and that was the husband. So she's on there, and she's got the headphones on, and Ted Jones, hello, you're on the air. What's your question? And this guy, I can't even repeat what he said, okay? I heard Mrs. Maroulis that after the meeting the other night, you and the other school board members, blah, 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 boom. Well, Margaret Maroulis, her eyes almost pop out of her head, and Ted, being in the altered state that he was in, he said, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? We missed some of that. And the guy repeated the whole thing all over again. Well, a lawsuit ensued. We lost our license. It was challenged with the FCC because somebody was out there taping all our shows because they were after our owner. Our owner did wacky things. So we ended up losing our license, and we had new owners. So I went through a bunch of owners, but Ted Jones left, oddly. And then the guy even back of him went to a newspaper job in Des Moines or something. So I ended up as news director within 5 months. The first hire I made was a guy that I went to school with in Manhattan, who's still my best friend today. He was smart. He went into insurance, and then he was a teacher in Mayapack, and now he is the chief spokesman for the Harvey School in Katona, my friend Chris. So anyway, I hired him, and we had a great time. We were all single. We shared a trailer in Highland. Again, for a different day. This is going to be part of my new book that's coming out. But anyway, so we got started in radio. So we got our foot in the door, and I did it through an through a real estate license that had no bearing really on my abilities. But it turned out I wasn't bad on the air. I can say that now. So I did news for 28 years. I covered all kinds of crazy things. Actually, I don't know if any of you even know this, and I'm not speaking out of school because it actually happened. But at Marist, there was a terrible incident at Marist in the cafeteria back in, I would say, the late 70s, mid 70s. And I had so many friends on the police force that they called me at home. It was like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I was doing mornings. I've done mornings my whole career, oddly enough. And they called me. They said, there's a hostage situation. You got to get over here if you want to be with. And again, I know it's hard to believe, but my friend was a member of the SWAT team for the town of Poughkeepsie. And I was standing next to him behind some weeds outside the cafeteria, and you could see the gunman walking by the window. And unfortunately, he had already killed his ex-girlfriend in the cafeteria. Boy, this is depressing, Mike. Thanks for bringing this up. But the point was that when they rushed in, I rushed in with them, so I was right at Johnny on the spot. I mean, there's no adrenaline rush that will prepare you for covering a big story if you're really into being a reporter than to being right there as something. They took the guy out in handcuffs right past me. I could have reached out and smacked him in the head if I was thinking clearly. He's still in jail, I think, doing life. So that kind of thing. I was there when, have you ever heard of the Tawana Brawley case? You've heard of that. It was a big protest, Al Sharpton, they were in Poughkeepsie. I got pushed off the steps of the Dutchess County Jail by some of their supporters because I was trying to get tape, I had my tape recorder. So, and it was, I was there when the hostages, you've seen the movie, what is it? Argo, yeah, I just saw that myself. Well, that whole hostage thing, when they were finally released, the main hostages, not the subject of the movie, the first place they landed, I don't know if you know this, was Stewart Airport. So we were there for that. A million different stories. In 28 years, you can imagine I covered a lot of news. But then, like anything else, you get a little tired of it. You don't have the same adrenaline rush that you did before. And so when the opportunity came in 2000, my former co-host in the morning, who was really his show, Ed Bear, the Ed Bear Affair, but it became Ed and Mike in the morning, He retired on St. Patrick's Day on a Friday was that year, was March 17th. And so that Monday, I started the show myself. And then Casey, my current partner, came about a month later in April of 2000. So we've been on the air ever since, which is a rarity in radio to have the same morning show for a long time. We're going into our 14th year. And each of the previous there's only been 3 morning shows in the history of HUD, and each has gone 14 years. So we're hoping to go 14 years in one day, and then we're both collapsing, and they're going to carry us out. But as I said before, the main thing about, the way I got to HUD, the station in Hyde Park went through 3 ownership changes, went through bankruptcy, went through an FCC channel, a couple of them. Whatever, I made it through the whole thing. I did sports talk. I used to do a talk show with a female boxer, Kat Davis, and I used to do programming. I hired and fired people. As a matter of fact, there was a time when the employees were so upset because they weren't getting paid on time that I went with the owner. He was getting a bank advance to pay the payroll from a local bank in Poughkeepsie. And I went with him to assure them, my workers, because I didn't want to tell him what they were going to do if he didn't come up with the pay by 5 o'clock. All the music was on big reels of tape. They were going to take what they call a degausser. Anybody know what that is? It's an eraser, like a handheld eraser, and they were just going to walk down the hall past all the music. And that would have been enough to just ruin every piece of tape. It would have sounded like, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. So they were going to just, they were so frustrated, they didn't know what else they would do, but they were going to ruin his job. So I went with him to the bank. Any of you ever watched The Honeymooners with Art Carney? Sister, you're the only one that's getting all my stories. So Art Carney used to do this bit where if he had to sign a paper of some importance, he would do this bit with the pen where he would just keep flexing his arms, and then finally Ralph Cramden, would say, just sign it, and well, that's what this guy did at the bank. Now it's like 5 minutes to 5. I know what this is before we had cell phones, so I know what they're about to do at 5 o'clock. And he's like, this one part-time guy, and he's like, we owe him $18, are you sure? I said, yes, just sign it, Warren. So he finally does all these flourishes, he signs it, I grab all the checks, I jump in my car, this is a God's honest truth, I drive as fast as I can up Route 9G. Thank God there were no cops around. I pull up into the driveway, I leave my car running, the door open, I run in, and they're standing there like this. It was like 5 o'clock on the button. I said, I got your checks, I know they're good, they're bank checks, go cash them, you can go have some food now, a little change of pace, you can pay your rent. So it was crazy, and actually I think I was going to have a nervous breakdown, because I had a child. No, Courtney was born after I didn't have any children, but I was living in an apartment in Wappingers, actually where Tawana Brawley claimed all this happened. So I thought I was going to be in the middle of the Tawana Brawley thing. But anyway, so I finally quit, and I said, that's it. I had been there 9.5 years, 3 ownership groups, every position in radio you could imagine. I learned a lot, but I said, I quit. And the first thing my mother says, so you quit another job? I said, Mom, I was there for 9.5 years. We went bankrupt. What do you want from my life? And my good friend, the weatherman Jim Witt, who's still with me on Saturdays, he also worked at HUD. And he called them and he said, this guy is really good, can you see him? So I quit on a Friday, I went for an interview on Monday, they hired me on the spot, and I started the following Monday. So I was out of work 1 week. And so that's how I started at HUD. And I was doing mostly, again, news. I was like 7th person they had a 7-person news department. And within 5 years, I was news director, because I just outworked everybody, and through attrition too, don't get me wrong. But I outworked everybody. It was like a challenge every night. I would work overnight, and I would say, where's the news? And I would call people up and get interviews at like 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, councilmen getting back from meetings, and I would cut them all up into multiple stories, and they would come in, and I have the news stacked up like this. Because I refused to work weekends and overnights after doing 9.5 years. So I just outworked everybody, and I became news director, and then eventually I used to work in the morning with Joe O'Brien, and when he would go on vacation, they said, we want you to fill in. I said, you want me to be a disc jockey? And they said, yeah. So I got a little taste of it then, back in the late, mid-'80s, and then when Ed retired, as I said, in 2000, I jumped at the chance, because I just wanted to do something different. I had covered every major story around these parts, for many, many years, and I want to do something. And now, the great part of my job are all the different TV stars, singers, and everybody that I get to interview. And over the last 13, 14 years, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. And one of the things I think about when I get up, as I said, is who am I talking to today? What am I going to ask them? And I love asking them, like, not personal questions to embarrass them or anything, but trying to make a connection with people. Like, for instance, this morning I interviewed, I haven't played it yet, but you know the voice of Roger Rabbit? You know who that is? Charles Fleischer. That's really all he's ever done. But turns out he's brilliant. He's got, like, published scientific papers and stuff, and Cornell University. I mean, he's, like, brilliant. But he does the Roger Rabbit. So I did my Roger Rabbit for him. He was not impressed. And then he did it, and I realized why he wasn't impressed. He really knows what he's doing. But anyway, so that was cool. And then this morning we had on Alan Menken. Do you know who that is? The composer that wrote all the Disney hits. He's got 8 Academy Awards, Aladdin and, right, Beauty and the Beast. He did Little Shop of Horrors. That was his, right? Yeah, I mean, as I said to him on the air, you had me at Little Shop of Horrors. You didn't have to do anything else. And he's from Westchester, so we had a nice little conversation with him, and then we played A Whole New World with Regina Bell and Peabo Bryson. Anyway, so this is the kind of thing, the range of people that you get to meet and be able to talk to. And now, and I point to you because I know you're pretty active in Twitter and everything. Now I tweet these people, and I actually get a response. Like, it's the most incredible thing. Do you know the guy, Grizz Chapman from 30 Rock, the big guy? Yeah. I had an occasion to meet him a couple of months ago at a wacky event we did in White Plains. And I see this guy standing there. I said, geez, this guy looks familiar. I mean, if you ever see him in person, he legitimately is 7 foot tall, 425 pounds. He's the big, and I've been to Giant Camp in Albany many, many times, and basketball games and everything else. I have never been near a bigger human in my life. He is the biggest person I've ever met. He is enormous, and he's just the sweetest guy. So I did an interview with him, and as it turned out, it was like 2 weeks before the last new episode of 30 Rock. So it was a great interview. I always have my tape recorder with me. It's out in my car, and I always carry it with me. And so I got Grizz Chapman, and the other night he had a little bit on Blue Bloods on CBS. So I tweeted, oh, it's nice to see Grizz Chapman. He tweeted right back, hey, Mike, I'm trying to get on Walking Dead. Can you put in a good word for me? So he's looking for work now that 30 Rock is over. So anyway, so that's the kind of thing I love now, is doing interviews. We have so much fun on the air. I will say this about my partner, especially since this is being recorded. I love working with Casey. No, I really do. I tell her this all the time, and I think she feels the same way. If we had to get up this early every day, Monday through Friday, and come into work and actually have to work at it, you know what I mean? Like, have to make it work and the chemistry and all that, but we have a natural chemistry. Now, off the air, we don't socialize, we don't go out every weekend, we don't, I mean, I know her husband, she knows my wife, that's fine. In fact, when we interviewed Jane Fonda, that was a weird one, but Jane Fonda says, are you two married? And we both burst out, to each other? Like that. So, no, we're not, but we respect each other, and we always had a natural chemistry. She was my intern back in 1983. And so I knew her from then. So when the time came to pick a co-host, everybody came up with the same name. So we work very well together. I think people that listen would attest to that, right, sister? And sister doesn't lie, right? No. We have a very natural back and forth. It isn't always perfect, but most of the time it's very easygoing, and it's very natural. We don't work at it. It just happens. It's like an ongoing conversation. We'll be talking off the air, and then we talk on the air. And sometimes we can't remember which is which. So that gets us in a little trouble. But we do a family show. We don't do edgy kind of stuff. We kind of keep it middle of the road, and it's worked very well for us according to the ratings. So that's where I am today, working with Casey, going into our 14th year next month, and looking forward to more interesting people. The other day, in a 24-hour period, I talked to Neil Sedaka, who's a songwriter that you may or may not know, Little Stevie from the E Street Band with Bruce Springsteen, who's bringing the Rascals to Broadway, which is pretty cool. Rita Moreno, who's one of only 11 people to have the 4 big awards, the EGOT or whatever they call it, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony. She's only one of 11. And somebody else, Jewel, I think it was, like in a 24-hour period, just like the different people, and some of them are authors, some of them are TV stars, some of them are movie stars, some of them are singer-songwriters. And it's just so much fun to talk to them and be able to, you know, connect with them one-on-one. I always try to say something that, so if I talk to them again, they'll remember me. You know, sometimes it's for the wrong reason. Like, one of the questions I get is, who was the worst interview you ever had? And this'll boggle your mind. Victor Borge. Now, most of you don't know who that is. He was this, where was he from? He was from, not Belgium. One of those countries over there, you know? And he was very funny. He would come on TV and he did this whole thing with the piano where he would do the different punctuations, with different keys. It's hard to explain what he did, but he was very funny. Worst interview ever. And I was so looking forward to it. I thought, oh, this guy's going to be fun, right? Victor Borge. So he was the worst. So I always carried that. And he really told me, he says, oh, this is the worst interview I've ever been involved with, he told me. So I always carried that as a cloud over my, you know, because I always thought I did pretty well with interviews. So years later, we had on Sandy Kenyon, who I think is on Channel 7 now. He's an entertainment reporter, and he was doing our weekly entertainment thing back when I was working with Ed Baer. And I said to, somehow Victor Borge's name came up. And Ed said to Sandy, who was on the phone, he said, well, geez, don't bring up Victor Borge in front of Mike. He goes into, you know, he goes crazy with that. And he said, oh, he says, get online. He's notorious for being like the worst interview. He gives everybody a hard time. And I hadn't heard that before. I didn't know he had that kind of reputation. So I was, oh, okay, well, now I don't feel, I mean, maybe it was a terrible interview on my part, but I felt very relieved, I must say, because I carried that burden for a long time. God rest his soul, Victor Borge. After I interviewed him, he couldn't have passed away quicker in my mind. No. He was Danish, that's what he was. He was Danish. I said, what is it like to be Danish? And he goes, it means you were born in Denmark. What's your next question? You know, he wasn't feeling me. And one of my favorites, I mean, I have a lot, like Stevie Van Zandt the other day was one of my favorites right off the bat. But years ago, I got to interview Gladys Knight, who's just incredible. And I told her when I was a younger man, just married, my sister took me to a concert. It was Gladys Knight and the Pips opening for Ray Charles and the Rayettes. Now, if any of you ever see, you can, and it was a theater in the round on top of everything else, so you had that going on. And I said, Gladys, I said, that was such a good show. At the end of the night, I went to the box office and gave them more money. And she laughed. She goes, oh, I'd never heard. She goes, that's really fun. I'm going to use that. I said, okay. So she was great. In fact, we had a receptionist who we called Bunny. And Bunny heard that I was going to interview Gladys Knight. She says, Mike, I got to talk to Gladys Knight. You got to have me talk to Gladys Knight. Mike, I want to talk to Gladys Knight. And Bunny was very persuasive. So I said, all right, I'll tell you what, when she calls, I'll have you in the room. We were in this little recording studio. You answer the phone, and you can, you know, say whatever you want, whatever. Well, Bunny's late. I answer the phone. All right, Gladys, here we go. We're rolling tape. I do the interview. Now Bunny comes in. I give her a set of headphones, and she's like, she's making all these facials because she knows she can't speak. So at the end of the interview, I said, Gladys, I have somebody here that wants to say hello who's a big fan. And Bunny gets on the, Gladys, how you doing, girl? Now she's, and Gladys Knight is like, how you doing, girl? Mike says your name is Bunny. Are you a little bunny or a big bunny or a Easter bunny? And Bunny says, I'm getting on that midnight train to Georgia, Gladys. So they're going at it for like 45 seconds or so. It seemed like an eternity. I'm like, oh my God. So we hang up the phone, and yeah, actually it was pretty funny. So I said, oh, that was great, Bunny. She says, well, when's the interview going to be on? I said, Monday at 7:15 or whatever. We take them, we edit them down, you know, we take out the driftwood, and we give you just the essential stuff. So Monday morning comes, and Ed, I had a chance to talk to Gladys Knight. Usually they're appearing at some place locally. That's why they make themselves available. They're trying to sell tickets. I said, I play the interview. Gladys Knight is great. She ends the interview. We go into, midnight train to Georgia. It sounds great. Bunny comes in. Where the hell's my part of the interview? I said, Bunny, I was going to put that on the air. I mean, people wouldn't, it was out of context. They don't know who you are. You're the receptionist. She was so indignant that I didn't use her part of the interview with, I said, all you did was yell at each other. So I gave her a copy of the tape, which I'm sure she still has. But So that was my most fun interview, was involving Bunny with Gladys Knight. But one of the cool things I got to say was I lost my uncle, who was really like my father, because my father died when I was 5. So my uncle took care of me most of his life, and then he died very dramatically from cancer. It was terrible. But one of the cool things about it was his favorite song was Take Me Home Country Roads by John Denver. You might have heard it. I'm sure you don't play it on your iPod. But, and I got to interview John Denver. And he had just written a book or something. And I had the tape, and I said to him, John, I said, I just have to tell you, and this I didn't use on the air, but I said, that song means so much to me and my family and my uncle. That was his favorite song. And you could tell John Denver was choked up like I am now. And he said, oh, he says, to hear that story, and I went into great detail. He said, it just means so much to have you tell me that. And then like 2 months later, he got killed in a plane crash. And then there was another one. The last time I saw my uncle, have you ever seen the movie The Man with Two Brains? It was directed by Carl Reiner and Steve Martin. Well, there's a scene in The Man with Two Brains, and it's not really a very good movie, frankly, but there's a couple of really funny moments in it. And my uncle, he was dying, he was sitting in the chair, we had blankets on him, and he literally died like days later. And we brought this movie up, we rented it, you know, from Blockbuster in those days. And I said, well, you know, this will be a couple of laughs. And there was a scene where Steve Martin is standing up, I thought that was a sliding glass, but up against a sliding glass door. And I think Bernadette Peters was in it, or somebody, and she walks by scantily dressed, and his hands are on the glass, and all of a sudden you hear the sound of glass breaking. Can I tell this story, sister? Yeah. I don't know. She's sending a text message to the new Pope right now. So anyway, it was just a very funny scene, and the juxtaposition of him having his hands on the glass, you hear the glass break, and my uncle started laughing. It's the last time I ever heard his voice, really. And he laughed and laughed and laughed. And when I got to talk to Carl Reiner a few years later, I told him that story. I'm really regretting that I'm getting into all this because it gets me too wound up. But I said to him, I said, can you imagine, that was the greatest moment he had at the end of his life, was seeing that scene in that movie. And Carl Reiner, he says, why are you telling me? He says, you got me so wound up now. He says, I'm having lunch with Steve Martin tomorrow. That's the first thing I'm going to tell him. So this has been, I'm really anxious. I hope you have some good questions, or any questions, really. I don't have any answers, but I hope you have some good questions. But this happens when I talk in public about my life, because I really lead a charmed life, and I apologize for being so silly, but especially after you've gone through, as I say, a heart attack, you really appreciate the things in your life that mean something. So my last thought to you is that whatever you do, I think I started off saying this, but I'll come back to it. Do something that you love. Don't settle for doing something just to pay the bills, because you'll regret it down the road. If you're able to do something, you can see how much it means to me, my career, my life, what I've done. It's been extraordinary, and I wouldn't trade a minute of it, even the bad times, for anything else. But appreciate the fact that the people in this room are trying to help you, whether it's through an internship, which I highly recommend. I know a lot of you are about to graduate, so it's maybe a little late, but your first job interview, working with a company, getting your foot in the door. If it's something you love, it doesn't have to be radio, but if it's something you love, then you're never going to work a day in your life. You'll really have a great life, and you'll look back, and you'll be as happy with your life as I am about mine. So what questions do you have? Thank you. And we really are working on a book. A friend of mine from high school is an author, and we're trying to put a book together with some of those stories in it. Oh, you want to know my sign? I'm a Sag. December 20th. We do horoscopes every morning at 6:45 on the Mike and Casey show. What sign are you, hon? Cancer. Okay. I do Cancer. We split them up, and we do them the same order every day. So I'm the Cancer guy. So when I do it tomorrow, what's your name? Diamond? Oh, I'll never forget that. Diamond. Tomorrow at 6:45, I'm going to mention you when we do Cancer. But I'm a Sag. And you know the funny thing is, I know my kids' birthdays, but I don't know what the signs are. March 20th is Michael. He's on the cusp? All right. And my other son is August 8th. Oh, okay. Well, if you guys can't decide. Now, you didn't think we were going to come in here and discuss astrological signs, did you? My daughter is, she was born on my mother's birthday, July 7th. Yeah, right, so she's like you, right? Okay, well, now I know. Now I know. But we do horoscopes every morning at 6:45. It's really fun. We have a good time with it.
Send me the clip tomorrow. I don't think she'll be up.
Yeah. Well, as I always say when we sign people up for a giveaway, and I said we're going to do it at 6:15, and the person says, well, I'm not going to be up. I said, well, as long as I'm up, that's all that matters, really. And then, like, if you're at like someplace like Empire City Casino, and you say we're going to have the drawing tomorrow at 6:15, and the woman says to me, here? I said, no, we'll be home tonight, and then I'll go to the station, and then we'll announce it on the radio. Yeah, they don't quite get it. And then the other thing is when we have the prize wheel, which I almost brought with me today. I should have brought the prize wheel. I know. And Samantha was going to help me because she's used to that on K104. But, well, thank you. We work hard. So when we do the prize wheel, if like Empire City, you get a really aggressive crowd. And I said, you have to land on me, meaning my picture on the wheel. All the disc jockeys' pictures are on the wheel. You have to land on me. This woman started climbing over the table. So yeah, I said, figuratively, not literally. So you have to be very careful. We've had some strange cases. Oh, I can't even tell you a lot of stories. I'll meet with you privately, or you can buy the book. Some of them will be in the book. Any other questions? Come on, you must have other questions. What's your sign? I wasn't expecting that. Come on. Are any of you thinking about radio? Oh, you are? All right, good. So what are you thinking?
I'd like to do sports broadcast.
Oh, my God. Well, nice to meet you. Holy mackerel. Well, you got the pipes, as they say.
I've heard.
Wow, and that's your natural voice?
Yeah.
Well, you know, the only one I know I have, yes. Wow, you got great voice. Now, do you do like on-air stuff here?
Yeah, I've worked at the night radio last semester.
Oh my God, just keep talking. No, really, you got one of those, that's half the battle. When you send out like MP3s or whatever it is you do to apply, like you're going to apply at ESPN, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right down the road. That's how you get to, what's the name of the lake compounds. You go to ESPN and make a left out in Bristol, Connecticut. You have half the battle won already. Because a lot of people, as I said, I was in a class that we had two Indian women, Priti Haksar and Bibi Sardesai. Now, that was 1972 that I met them. They were the wives of UN officials, and they were learning how to broadcast so they could go back to India and do it in their home country. And they were great. And I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but I remember those two women's names. It's funny how you remember things, but you've got a great start. Man, you've got a good voice. Now, do you enjoy being, like speaking in front of people or into a microphone?
Yeah.
No qualms about that?
No.
That's good. A lot of people, they have to be in a dark room with the lights turned down and just with headphones and talking into a mic, and if anybody comes in, they get all kinds of crazy. But you have a great voice, so that's really good. Play-by-play or?
Either or, commentating, play-by-play.
And you know sports?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm just giving you a hard time. But really you have a great voice, so that's really good because that'll catch the ear of people that do the hiring. If you're talking about radio specifically, because that's part of the thing. You get these. We had one kid that was great in class, and he had a great voice, but he just made no sense at all. The little conversation we had, he couldn't do that. But he had a great voice. What's his name? Robert or something. I can't remember his name. Some people I purposely forgot the names of. And you too are radio?
Yeah, I do some work at the station here also.
Oh, you got a good voice too. Well, he really has a very distinctive voice, but you have a good, we had people that had speech impediments and stuff, and look, it's a terrible thing, but I mean, it's not something that's going to readily get you on radio, that you have a lisp or that you have, a sibilant S or whatever. So if you don't have that, you're in much better shape. And somebody over, is it you?
Yes.
And what did you want to do?
Right now I'm going through a trial process with United Radio, so I really like to do like the whole 360 from politics to pop culture,
Really?
international as well.
You have a nice voice too.
How come you never compliment my voice?
Oh, you have a great voice too, Samantha. You're usually yelling at Jeremiah, so that's the only thing I hear. No, I'm just kidding. Yes?
Is there anyone that you haven't interviewed that you want to?
Oh, yeah. There are a few. Either one of the remaining Beatles. That would be cool. I had a dream about Paul McCartney the other night, which probably is not a good thing to admit. Yeah, either one of them. Ringo. Ringo doesn't do much. Although he did at Bethel Woods, and I should have gotten over there and tried to get him there. But McCartney would be cool, just to be able to say you did it. But I would be just like the guy on SNL, Chris Farley, Remember when you wrote, whatever? Remember that? Yeah, that was great. Yeah, that was great. That would be me. That would be me. Definitely that would be me. But there's a few. I mean, it's a lot of the, I don't get starstruck anymore. I've interviewed enough people now that have enough credentials. Like the guy we interviewed this morning has 8 Oscars. It doesn't get much better than that. He's written some of the best, most recognizable music in movies ever. So it's a lot of fun. And when you can just talk to them, you find out they're just people. That most of them are just people that, some of them are a little more difficult than others to deal with. Not to, disparage him, but like I interviewed Howie Mandel a few times recently, and he's not difficult, but he's real specific. Like you don't go off on any. If he's there to talk about America's Got Talent, then you don't talk about Mobbed, or you don't talk about his stand-up. You just stick to and he'll bring it right back. He's very, very good at that. So there's some people that are a little. I had, is it Inside Edition? Deborah Norville. I actually like Deborah Norville, and the first time I interviewed her, she sent me a thank you note, which is the only one I've ever gotten. But then the next time I had her on hold and we were about to go on the air, I said, all right, Debbie, here we go. She says, it's Deborah. And I said, okay, Deborah. But she was telling me that she wouldn't want me to call her Debbie on the air to make it sound like we're very familiar with each other, because we're not. But she's very nice, and I think she does a great job on TV. She was the one that was on the Today Show and led to all kinds of, and they have their own problems now. Forget about Mike and Casey, the Today Show. Poor Matt Lauer. The Daily News has it out for him. My God, every day they have a negative story. I've met him a few times. Seems like a nice enough guy, but they are really after him. The insiders say he's going to be fired, and he's, I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, it's just a slump in the ratings. And that's one thing. When you get to be like our station in the morning, you're really driven by the ratings. In the old days in Hyde Park, the rating, there were no ratings. If somebody called, they'd go, oh my God, a phone call. But now we're very contingent upon the ratings. And thank God, the ratings have been very, very good. But if they see a trend that isn't upward, but either flat or down, then all of a sudden you got consultants coming in and you got people telling you what to do. I had a guy tell me the other day, we have a lot of consultants over the years. One consultant we had in all the years, it was like 4 or 5 years he was our consultant, never said a positive thing to me, ever. Never complimented, and you would think he'd find something to say. I like your shoes, something. Never said a nice word about me. And then the current guy that we have, we love, and he kind of likes, he can't believe that I made the transition from news person to disc jockey and that it's successful. I think he's a little surprised. But they told me, what is it? Oh, don't say morning. Just say, 8:15. Don't say this morning or AM. I said, why would that be? Oh, people know it's morning. I said, well, people probably know it's 8:15 too, but I mean, so, the consultants, the one thing about consultants is when they show up, they have to say something, otherwise there's no need for them to be there. So they, if you're having a successful run, they'll nitpick something, because otherwise there's really, if they just come in and say, you guys are great, I wouldn't change a thing. Well, I say, okay, well, we don't need you, right? I mean, so you have to be a little bit wary of consultants. Some of them are very, very good. The guy that we have now is among the best I've ever seen. He's really good at taking and tweaking the music and stuff like that, because we also play music in the morning. I should describe the show. We do, giveaways. We have news, weather, traffic, sports, celebrity interviews, and music and commercials. And when you map it out, it's more than 60 minutes, but somehow we fit it all in. I don't know. It's magic. We only play half the commercials. Any other questions? Come on. Oh, there you go.
When you first started, did you ever get starstruck?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember years ago. Well, yeah. In person, yeah. But most of them are on the phone, so it's less intimidating. But they called one day and they said, Mary Tyler Moore's on the phone for you. And I was expecting it, but I think it was a little early or whatever. And I was just like, hamana. I didn't even know where to start. This was a few years ago, so she was really like at the pinnacle of her career. And that one set me back a little bit. And there's been a few, but not so much lately. I mean, I've really done so many. It's more just doing a lot of interviews. It's not that I've interviewed such big names. Some of them are big, and some of them are middling, and some of them you'll never hear of again. But when you've done enough interviews, you get very comfortable. And it's real important to be comfortable, because I feel that's the key. I want to be like very, half the time, I was interviewing, Lisa Loeb, the singer-songwriter. Lisa Loeb, Stay, no? Well, she was real big about 20 years ago. And I finally nailed an interview. No, I'm just kidding. We were talking, and she said to me, have we started the interview? And I took that as a compliment, because we were just having a conversation, and I was just going to pick out the best parts. So I try to be very conversational with people, and just kind of, joke around a little bit, do something that's a little off the beaten path so that they'll remember the interview. And most of them remember, or, not for good reasons, but they remember. But I've done a lot of interviews now. We do, probably in 1 week, we'll probably do like 10 interviews. One day I had 5 interviews between 9 and 10:30, just one right after another. And most of them are for, the TV shows. And the people that you get are usually the shows that are about to get canceled. We just had Anthony Edwards on, the guy from ER. And his show, I talked to him on Monday, and his show got put on hiatus on Tuesday. So it was his last bit to try to generate some interest. And when they do these interviews, let me just explain how these work. The TV networks primarily is where we get our interviews. And they will send you a pitch in an email. And they send it to stations all across the country. And what they do is, if you're lucky to get on a tour, like some of them are hard. Like last week they had Dustin Hoffman. He produced a movie and he directed it, I guess. And that one filled up, and I didn't get on that one. Because for every 39th market that wants to get on, there's, the first 39 that want to get on. And usually they only have them for 2 hours or less. And everybody gets like 8 to 10 minutes. So they go from, Milwaukee, and then 8 minutes later they're in Philly, and then they're in Austin, whatever. And hopefully sometimes we're on that list. So, but that's what happens. So they do one station after another. They sit in a room, or they're like, Jewel was in her, kitchen. And she just got a sheet from the company that said, you call this number at that time, you call this number at that time. And then you learn to stay on schedule. You don't run over your time, because you'll get cut off or you get banned from doing them. So you have to be respectful of the other professional that's waiting at the next station to do the same interview. But I'm usually very happy to talk to most anybody. And we have one rule, it's called the Hayden Panettiere rule, that I developed. And it was years ago when she was first starting out. She was like 14 or whatever. She was doing a TV movie of the week. And this was before she hit it big as the cheerleader on Heroes. And she's a local kid. She grew up in Rockland County. And so we had this whole interview, but I never said, oh, would you do a greeting for Mike and Casey? And I always have them do that now, because we use it on their birthday, or if they get nominated for something or whatever. And we throw in, hi, this is Hayden Panettiere. You're listening to Mike and Casey on WHUD. It's a giggle for me. I just think it's funny. So, but I forgot to have her do it. And then Heroes hit, and she became like this, I don't want to say superstar, but she was very popular, especially, still is, but very much then. And I said, oh man, I'm so upset that I didn't get her to do a greeting that we could use after the interview. And so I instituted the Hayden Panettiere rule, and that is, I get everybody to do it. If some, don't have time, or time runs out, but if I can get them to do it, I get everybody to do it, because I don't know if they're going to be the next Hayden Panettiere, who's going to be 6 months from now the biggest thing since sliced bread, So then I interviewed Hayden Panettiere again, and I told her, I said, and do you know that you are the Hayden Panettiere rule? She says, what is that? And I told her the story, and she just got the biggest charge out of that I used her as an example as to why I get everybody to do it. But, and then I meet a lot of people through the K104 concerts. I hang out with my son, and so we, One Direction and The Wanted and The Fray and Rita Ora, and yeah, a million people. So that's kind of cool. So I try to stay current with that because we're playing a lot of that music. We end up playing a lot of that on HUD now because we have a lot of music in common with K104. So a lot of the times when they have an artist, if I can get tape from the artist, I can use it on my station. So that's pretty cool. So it's a nice little synergy. And my son is like in on all the interviews, so I just hang out with him. Right, Samantha?
Mike's all about interviews.
Yeah, he's good. And they give him a lot of interviews to do. He just did Philip Phillips. I remember I did David Cook here at the Mount when he was here, when he first won American Idol.
I think he did Britain Coleman.
And he's got the same birthday as me, by the way. Mark that down, Diamond. December 20th, I remember that. We have that in common, David Cook and I. He was a nice guy, too.
One of the ones about to graduate, I'm interested in television broadcast.
Okay.
A little bit of radio.
Well, I can tell you everything I learned was in one day. So I learned.
Well, I recently just talked to a news anchor and found out about the pay and how you're going to have to start really low, and I got really discouraged about it. So and then
I meant to tell you about that.
and then I think about, like, should I just go into a field of just the communications department and forget my dream and, like, but then I, like, hear your story.
No, never forget your dream. Well, listen, I should have said that. I mean, if somebody told me years ago, if you really want to make some money, go work for IBM. This was when IBM was in its heyday. If you just want to have a good career and, you're not Howard Stern, then you're going to, you'll get by. I mean, I live a comfortable life. I'm not crazy rich by any stretch, but I've also been doing it for over 40 years. So you would think that I would reach some degree of success, financially. But if it's money you're after, probably.
No, I want to do reporting and anchoring, but then I, like, hear that and I'm like, will I ever get to where?
Yeah, well, if you're good and you work hard and you have the drive and the initiative and you have the ability, yeah, you probably will. You'll get, and TV pays better than radio, so let me know where you are and I used to do a TV show locally on cable for 3 years. In fact, we won a Telly Award called Mike Bennett on the Road, and I would go to all these different venues from New York City to out to Foxwoods, I Call, and we would interview all these celebrities on camera. Gavin DeGraw was one of the people we had on. I forget. We had 1 million people on. And it was fun. We did that for a while, too, which was like a nice little side job to what I do on the radio. And now I have a lot of on-the-air endorsement deals suddenly. I don't know what happened, but I'm endorsing everything under the sun. And as long as it's something you can believe in and you can honestly say that you either use it or you know about it and it's a good product, then it's not so bad. And they pay you to endorse products on the air. So I speak for a bank, I speak for a medical center, a money management guy who actually does handle my retirement money. So I'm about to do stuff for Allstate, a lawn care product or a service, St. John's Medical Center, spine and hip replacement place over in Rockland, But that's where you make your money, either that and personal appearances. So if I do a station appearance, we get paid extra for that. So that adds up, so that's nice. But I wish you well, but don't give up your dream. That's crazy, don't do that. You're just a kid, you're just starting. Because you'll regret it. You'll always look back and say, geez, what if I had done that?
Yeah, I think about, like, what if.
No, don't think about what if, just do it. Just do it. And yeah, if you struggle, so you eat, canned tuna for a couple of years. Or you borrow from mom. I used to borrow from my mother. I was working in Hyde Park. I was making nothing. We had a thing, and with all due respect to everybody in the room, we had a thing that had a name. I can't even tell you the name. But what the management did was, it was an overtime rule. The more you worked, and now it's illegal, but in those days it was legal, the more you worked, the less you got paid per hour, so you always got paid the same amount. Did you ever hear of that? It's like a scam. So if you worked 60 hours, well, then you were making $2 an hour. And if you worked 40 hours, oh, you were making $4.95, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it worked out, no matter how many hours you worked, you got the same amount of money. And we all ended up filing charges with the Labor Department. We ended up getting settlements. So you can run into shady dealers, too. But I would do TV. Yeah, you'd be good at that. Yeah, keep going. Don't stop.
Do you have a
I'm sorry?
Do you have a LinkedIn account?
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah, LinkedIn, yeah, it's Mike Bennett. But I don't understand. Twitter I love. Facebook I like. And LinkedIn, I have all these people saying they're endorsing me for things that I don't even know how to do. So the LinkedIn I don't understand really. I mean, I'm linked to a lot of people. I think I'm linked to you. I'm linked to a lot of people, but I don't know what that gets. No, but I don't know where it gets me at the end of the day. Twitter, at least I get a response. Like during the Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve, they had this great commercial from Google. Did you see that? Where they did like the year-end recap with all the things that happened and shows the guy jumping out of the spaceship and then landing with the parachute on Earth, and it showed Michael Clark Duncan who had died and so and so. And it shows rioting, all these events, and it was edited in such a way it was incredible. And I put on Twitter, and all I said was Google. I said, I love that Google ad that just played on the Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve. Send out a tweet, you know, I don't know, just something I wanted to say. Boom, I get an answer from Palo Alto, California, the company that produced the commercial, that did the editing. And I guess they were following the word Google. So they sent me back, oh, we're glad you enjoyed it. Here's the link if you want to see it again, you know, whatever. And we started this little conversation about it. And that to me is incredible. You know, it's one thing to have your Facebook friends or on Twitter, people that follow you, and you know they're going to see it, whether they like it or not, who knows. But when you can just send something out and get a response. I did an interview with the guy from Revenge. Anybody watch Revenge? Yeah, that's like a appointment TV, right? If you're into that show. The guy that plays the guy that's helping the lead character? Nolan. That's it, Nolan. Interviewed that guy. He was really cool, by the way. And he and I exchanged tweets after that. So I'm tweeting with him, and all of a sudden I get this tweet from this young lady, and she's like, oh, I'm going to share this with all my friends. She was in Latvia. And then when I played the interview, she was so good at what she did. She was listening to the interview and tweeting quotes from him from the interview in real time and accurately. And I sent her a tweet, and I said, man, whatever you do for a living, you ought to be a reporter because you are really good. All the quotes were accurate. They were quick. I don't know how she did it. And this was in Latvia. I'm like, what is going on? You know, when I started, we didn't have internet. We didn't have cell phones. I know it's the dark ages. We used to have disc jockeys that, you know, they had to cue the records up on the turntables by hand. You know, now that you have mobile DJs that kind of do that, you know, all that scratching and all that, but you actually had to do that. And then what they call a slip cue, where you cued it up and you kept the turntable running and you do the intro and let it go and the song would come on. And the guys that were really good, you'd never know. Some of them were like, when it's in, you know, those guys aren't really working in radio anymore. Any other questions? You had your hand.
I just wanted to ask, like, because there are a few people here that are graduating
right.
in radio. What's your best advice to them
yeah.
getting their start?
Probably should have done that instead of all my silly stories. But, well, look, if you can get your foot in the door, that's the main thing. I say, you know, under any circumstances, when I was at OC, I met a young man who his last name is Bennett, coincidentally, and I'm trying to get him in the door, and I'm having a tough time. You know, I want to have them hire him as a promotions guy and all this stuff, because I think the kid just needs a chance to get his foot in the door. He's got a good voice, got a voice similar to yours. And I think if he got the opportunity, he would flourish. So what I would say is, you know, it's a tough job market no matter what kind of job you're trying to get, from what I'm told. So if you're lucky enough to have a job, fine. But if you're looking for a career, get your foot in the door, even if it's, you know, Sweeney Murdy that's on the Fan, that's the Yankee reporter on the Fan? You must know him. You know the name, right? Sweeney Murdy on the Fan? Well, he and I become kind of friendly, and he gave my son great advice. We went to the Yankee parade in 2009 when they won the World Series and ran into Sweeney, and I had known him a little bit. And he told my son, he said, when I started in radio, and he's now the Yankee beat reporter. He goes all over the country with the Yankees. Lives in Hopewell Junction, by the way. He says, when I started, he says, I did everything. They asked me to, you know, come in some weekend and paint one of the studios. He said, I came in and painted. He said, I volunteered for everything. I never said no to anything. And that was great advice for my son, because it showed him what you needed to do to get ahead, you know. It doesn't mean that you work for free your whole life, but it means that you do whatever you can. Show, you know, be there ahead of time. Be, you know, appropriately dressed and ready to go. You know, all the things, be prepared. You know, in in my car, because I never know where I'm going to be next, I carry my tape recorder. Oh, and I want to show you my prop that I brought with me before I leave. I carry, you know what wisps are? A little portable, you brush your teeth, but it's just got like a little thing and you bite into it. I carry those in my car, but my family thinks I'm nuts. But, you know, sometimes I get a call and I have to go someplace. I have to go do an interview or whatever. And I carry that, and in my trunk, I carry all the stuff that we use at appearances. I have a registration box, pens, entry, in case the crew shows up and we're missing something. That's me, you know. I'm overly prepared. And I was in the Boy Scouts, but that was the only thing I did well in the Boy Scouts, be prepared. So I would just encourage you to get your foot in the door, whatever it is you want to do. Whatever your dream is, keep it as long as you can. You know, sometimes the dreams don't come true, but at least keep it as your dream, and hopefully you'll see it happen. And if you get your foot in the door, impress the right people. Don't get involved in all the office politics and gossip and all that crap. I've seen that ruin more careers. You know, people that, you know, get involved with stuff that has nothing to do with work. And that can really be a drawback. You know, don't get involved in the day-to-day drama of just be above it all, disregard it, keep your nose to the grindstone. You're not going to come up with a million cliches, but it's really true. That's why they've been around for as long as they have. If you just work hard and you love what you're going to do, then you'll just have a great career, you know. And you'll look back and you'll be sitting up here in 30 years talking to some young kids that are about to embark on a career. I mean, I look at you guys and I think, wow, I'd love to be in your position, because you don't really know yet what's going to happen, but you have your whole life to experience all these things, you know, and you have these people like Kathleen and Sister and everybody else who are going to help guide you, you know. So listen to what they say more than what I've said, because half of what I said, you know, I don't even remember. But that's the way it is in radio, you know. People will come up to you and say, oh, that was so funny, that bit you did at 7:15. I said, well, you'll have to remind me, because I have no idea what it was. And Casey's the same way, so it's not just me. But it's a great life, you know. To get up that early, you have to enjoy what you do, you know. And you have to be able to take a nap. Very important. Naps are underrated. Naps are the best. There's nothing wrong with a nap. If I didn't have a nap almost every day, I would have keeled over long ago. You have to be able to nap. So, any other questions? I don't want to cut anybody off. Yes? Yes?
Music-wise, aside from like you making connections with people, I'm noticing that for people to like seek songs, they're not necessarily going to radio anymore.
That's true.
Online, and
Yeah.
most tunes are more viral than anything else. So where do you see with radio having an impact on the music industry later on in the future?
No, well, that's a great question. I guess if anybody really knew that for certain, they could make a lot of money. It's really hard to say. You know, like a lot of the artists don't even have record contracts anymore. You know, we interviewed Bryan Adams, the singer-songwriter, and he told us, I'm never making another album. Now, he may change his mind, but that's what he said that day. You know, so it's a changing world. You know, somebody like, you know, Justin Bieber started on the internet. You know, when he was like, what, 14 or whatever, when he came to the station, he was playing down in the lunchroom with his guitar. I mean, we didn't know he was going to be this. Yeah, about 5, 6 years ago, whatever. So yeah, the internet has changed everything because people can get their music up at no cost, and if you're lucky enough to get noticed by somebody, I mean, that's half the battle. So, but I think there'll always be a role for terrestrial radio, because they said when TV came in, they said, oh, radio's dead, and of course that didn't happen. And at every turn, now they're saying cars are going to have no AM/FM radios in the future. That's one of the new big stories in the last couple of weeks for radio. And everybody's like, oh my God, you know, well, whatever. People will demand that they have it, or if they don't, they'll listen on their smartphones. You know, we have an app. Every station that, you know, most stations have an app. So a lot of people listen on their smartphones now. And maybe that's the way people will listen to radio in the future, just be on their phones. Or, you know, they'll have an implant behind their ear, you know, and you tap your temple twice and it goes to FM. You know, it sounds crazy, but, you know, I can't believe how things have changed since I started. As I said, you know, we used to have turntables with 45s. You know what 45s are? 45 records? No? Vinyl. Well, they were called 45s. Records. I have thousands of them. I should have brought them in. Oh, so let me show you my prop. Did any of you watch The Following? Nobody watches The Following? Oh, well, then the hell with the prop. Well, it's a creepy new show with Kevin Bacon. You don't watch it? Well, I just want to show you, one of the things, besides great interviews, the Fox people especially, they send you all kinds of stuff. Like at home, I have a American Idol gumball machine. You know, crazy tchotchke, you know. But this came one day at work, and the people downstairs were like, what is this? Because it looks so creepy. This is all Edgar Allan Poe quotes. And the bad guy in the movie, in the TV show, and it's all filmed around here in Ossining and everywhere, he's a real devotee of Poe. And so his followers, that's the name of the show, The Following, they run around killing people with this mask on. Now, how creepy is that? So this arrives in my office one day, and I open it up, and I have no idea. It's light, but I don't know what it is. And Fox sends me these crazy things. I look in this box, and this thing is looking back at me. And I hadn't seen the show yet. And I was like, oh, dear God. It looked like a cross between Adolf Hitler and they said, no, I think it's Edgar Allan Poe. And it's just the creepiest thing. So this sits in my office, and I put it right on the table behind my desk. So when I'm not there, it looks like I'm there. And the people are so freaked out at the station. And then they sent me more of them. And I gave one away on the air, and some crazy woman that calls all the time from Connecticut won it. So if you hear of a crazy woman running around Danbury, Connecticut with an Edgar Allan Poe mask on, scaring the bejesus out of people, you can thank me. So this is the kind of crazy stuff we get in the mail. Yeah, anyone who wants to put it on, take a picture for Facebook, feel free. I did an appearance at Mahoney's in Poughkeepsie the other day, first time I've ever been there. And the disc jockey that was working with us, his name was Mike, and they even, it says, I didn't even know it had something on there too, Nevermore. Creepy. But he came up and took a picture of it, and he goes, oh, I love that show. That's crazy that you have one of those. And I said, yeah. I said, so at the end of the night, I gave it to him. I figured, well, he really got a kick out of it, so you know. My wife ran around the bar with it on. Yeah, this is great. This is what I do in my off time. But it's difficult to breathe, so that's... And if you saw the show, like in the second episode, the guy in this mask sets a guy on fire at random in the street. I mean, this is not a good thing. But this is the kind of stuff Fox has always been edgy. You know that from their programming. And they send you the most bizarre things. I got stuff from all the different shows that they have, New Girl and everything. But anyway, so that's the Edgar Allan Poe head that I wanted to bring and show to you. So I'm glad you got a kick out of that. And now you'll all have nightmares. And if you see that they're going to be filming in town, call me and I'll give you the mask and you can go down to the set. Because if you show up with this on, they're not going to expect that at all. Because these are not readily available. It's a promotional item that they put together. So, any other questions? Now you know why I'm so twisted, but I get such a kick out of this stuff.
I'm just in shock you get stuff like that. We get like pens and...
Well, I'm just telling you, a lot of the networks send stuff, but Fox is just known for their wacky stuff. This was the wildest I've ever seen.
I can see Mike running around like that.
Yeah. It's really cool. So if you want to put it on and take a picture, feel free.
Or do you like interview celebrities from the Fox network? Is that why?
Oh, sure, yeah. And from this, we interviewed the guy who's the second banana to Kevin Bacon. He's also an FBI. His name is Sean Ashmore. And I interviewed him. In fact, he says, yeah, we'll be filming in your neck of the woods because we say Westchester Station, even though the offices are in Beacon, the studios are in Beacon. Our transmitter and everything is in Peekskill. And we have to say Peekskill when we identify the station at the top of the hour. That's a legal requirement. So we still consider ourselves a Westchester station. The fact that they moved us in 1998, that's just, we don't let on, really. We don't talk about being in Beacon because the bulk of our listenership is in Westchester. But anyway, they film all over the place down there. So if you want to run down there and really cause a stir on the set. And Kevin Bacon's a really cool guy. We've had him in the studio. I did a couple of appearances with him in White Plains. We were 2 sold-out shows. He does a thing with his brother called the Bacon Brothers. They do music. He's really pretty good. So I'm not claiming I'm friends with him, but I have met him, and we went out to dinner. So I know him a little bit, and now he's got this hit show that's really creepy. Scariest show I've ever seen on TV. So anyway, there you go, Edgar Allan Poe. I wanted to bring some you know, literary knowledge to the presentation, so I brought Poe with me. Nevermore. So any other questions? Anything else I can dissuade you from? I used to, when I was, my younger days, when I would do like a career day at a high school, I would discourage anybody that was even, you know, if you said you were, I would discourage you because I thought they were going to come and take my job. So I would say, oh, no, don't do it. But now that I'm towards the end of my career and retirement is on the horizon somewhere down the road, you know, I encourage you. You know, if you can get yourself a job like I have, you will never be unhappy. You'll just have the best time. I've made some of the most amazing people in my life. And most of it, and I just will make this the last point, most of it is through charity work, and that's real important. You mentioned the Dominican sisters. I love doing that thing with Mary Higgins Clark and Carol Higgins Clark, the writers. And I did stuff for the Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital to help build that thing, and I got to know so many people from David Cohn and on down the line, and I've made so many great connections that ended up actually some of them to money-making connections, but that was not important. What I've gotten out of this stuff and to see kids in the hospital, knowing that I had something to do with building that hospital, you can't, you know. The last story I'll tell you, my brother, he has 6 kids. He lives in Monroe, and his 3rd child was at Seton Hall. And he called up and he said, Megan is very sick. She has immune problems. It's almost like she had a stroke. She had trouble walking. She was not able to verbalize. So they had her at all these different hospitals, and then and they didn't know what was wrong. And then finally one day my brother called me. And he says, I think we finally have an answer. He says, we're at the Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital. They put us in the room, and I look on the door, and it says, this room donated by Mike Bennett and the WHUD listeners. He says, I take that as a sign. And she ended up, she had had an infection in the base of her brain. It was like a stroke. And she went through extensive rehab. She's still not 100%. She never will be, but she's pretty close. She graduated from Seton Hall, and she's in graduate school now. So, you know, that to me is a sign, you know, that he was able, and you know, they didn't know who he was. They just put him in a room. And through our listeners and our radiothons over the years, we raised, you know, $50,000 twice for each of the rooms. We've actually raised now like over $500,000. But anyway, that's the rewarding end of my job. So do charity work, get involved early. You'll make great connections, and it'll make your life, you know, more fulfilling to do all that stuff. So those are my recommendations. Stay away from this guy.